Well, hello everyone. It's Heather live on Friday, and it's Friday and it's Juneteenth. And I'm excited today. We're going to do a little bit of celebration, a little bit of learning, a little bit of inspiring. And so today I have a guest. I have Cordelia Gaffar. And she and I just recently got connected, but it was because I think we had kind of shared journey, and some of our experiences were similar, but I think our language spoke to one another. And so I'm just so excited to have you on, Cordelia. Welcome.
Thank you, Heather. I'm really excited to be here. Um, I think it was an article of yours I read. You were talking about um, your future Black men that you're raising, and that just really spoke to me. I have two young sons. One is technically been seen as a Black man since he was 14 because he's so tall.
Yes, I do know.
So
Yeah, I have that same one. Mine's about over 6 foot now, and he's 15. And yeah, it's hard for me to see it when he's like cuddling with me, and his legs are like as long as the river, and I'm like, you're not a baby anymore, but you want to be, but you're not. And fortunately, now he's learning to drive. So this whole issue that we're facing right now. So we're on, we're Juneteenth today, of which I think before today was not something celebrated by corporate America. And today, I don't know, I woke up and CNBC had it posted everywhere. Like so many corporations, so many executive teams decided to honor and celebrate by taking the day off, or getting off early, or taking a half day on today, Juneteenth. And so, today being the oldest celebration of the end of slavery for African Americans, and it's been traditionally folks in certain neighborhoods who have actually celebrated that. So I'm not even sure if African American people that were in suburbs or in other places were really celebrating it as much. But now it's just like, I don't know, it's become the thing. So I thought it was going to be kind of cool. We both did, to come on here and just talk about it, and talk about a little bit about the history, about our stories, and then how we see maybe a road forward from some of this. We are not the be all end all with this discussion. There are many voices out there that I'm always interested to hear, and I have been reading and hearing, and so it informs us. So I'm glad that you were all here for us as well. So when you were out there, don't forget to chime in. Let us know who's out there, please, because we can't see you. And then if you ever have a question or you want to have a comment, please do that and interact with us, because that's what makes this fun. If it's she and I talking, we can do that too for a very long time, but
Yes.
it'll be even more fun if you join in. So I don't know. I think it'd be kind of cool to start off just talking a little bit about maybe journeys, but then how that journey, that 100-year cycle that you were talking about, which I think is just amazing when you talk about that. I'd like to hear your side, and then I can always chime in with some of my things as well.
Yeah. So, first of all, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cordelia Gaffar. I'm actually an author, speaker, and I call myself the emotions opener. So that's going to be the solution side of the conversation, because heated emotions right now. And I help people to actually dive into their difficult and darkest emotions to show up powerfully. So this is a great time to do that. And whatever it is that is your area of expertise, this is an opportunity for you to align and connect with other people, specifically Black people, and see where you can help and be part of the solution. So the 100-year cycle that I thought about was like, it's like 2020, right? So what was happening in America 100 years ago? Well, my father happens to be from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he was born in 1911. And his family bolted out of Tulsa in about 1920 because of the racial tension. And they ended up in Charleston, South Carolina, which is going to be funny when I tell you what happened in 1822. Anyway, so, and as we know, May 31st through June 1st, 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was known as the Black Wall Street at that time, because so many educated and well-to-do Black people had made that their home and had built businesses and all kinds of things. Well, for 24 hours, there was a killing spree. And no, these people were just normal people, let's say, for the most part. But the police actually trapped all the Black people in town and allowed free range, letting the white people just kill them all. So it was not police brutality. It was the police were doing. They were serving and protecting white people because that's actually their function. And their function, that's what the police force was. They were originally given the task to get, what do you call those, runaway slaves, right? So when they had the fugitive slave laws, that's really when you first see the emergence of the police. And so so this wasn't like anything abnormal, right? 100 years ago, it was like now that's Memorial Day for us, but that was like killing spree day for them. And they just killed everybody in town. I think there was one black family that lived. So 100 years before that, in Charleston, South Carolina, there's a man called Denmark Vesey. Denmark Vesey he's the kind of slave that we don't hear about. He actually came to America as a navigator on a merchant ship. And he was a navigator because he spoke so many languages. And he was like 14 years old. However, when they ended up in the port of Charleston, South Carolina, which was a slave state, he was apprehended and became a slave. So because he could speak all these different languages, and that's one of the things that they did in slavery is divide and conquer, right? They separate you from your people, from your homeland. So he could speak all the languages of all the different new slaves. And of course, he could speak English and Spanish and French too. So he put together the biggest slave rebellion ever. And unfortunately, it was not successful, but it put so much fear of property in the white people. That's kind of like the beginning of making sure that they could secure their property. So what you see transpiring now is all the laws from that point on were all about securing white supremacy, white property, white political power, and white economic power. And with the even with the few changes in laws here and there, there's enough loopholes in each of the laws to secure white supremacy. So to be honest, not much has changed in 200 years. Yeah.
It's a sad state. I never really, I haven't spent a lot of time, let's say, in the last several years thinking this through. And this most recent event, which is again the first of, I couldn't count. I'd have to go back and see how many times this has taken place. The thing that happened with George Floyd, it's caused me to really evaluate that side of my heritage and to start to learn more and to go deeper and to open myself up to a different way of thinking. Because I've always had one way, I talked about before. It's like I feel like no matter what shoes we're in, we all come with our own filter.
Yeah.
And it's often based on how we're raised, the houses we're raised in, the people that are around us, the schools we attend, the communities we surround ourselves, or that basically we're in, right? And so that filter then walks with us and talks with us. And there are ways to change how that filter is revealed or shows up by like doing some of these things and listening in and learning and being a part. I mean, just continue to have exposure and being open to new different ways helps kind of to change our filter.
It does. Right? Well, that's the other part of it, because it changes your filter if you go into that conversation, right? First of all, with, whatever you have to do, meditate, get yourself to a peaceful state and centered, and just be open to having an open heart and an open mind and really fully hearing from a human perspective the other side. You have to start. That's like step one.
Yeah.
And step two is like, once you hear something and you notice a difference in the change in your body, right? Your heart starts racing, your hips lock up, your head starts pulsating. You actually have the impulse to cover your ears. Like, I can't hear that, then, take note of that, pause and like examine, why am I being triggered right now? What did I just hear that that makes me upset. And why does it make me upset? The answers to those questions may surprise you. What are my values such that I can't hear what this person has to say right now? I hosted an event the other day with a friend of mine. She's white. And we wrote an article together last year about misconceptions and Muslims, right? And so during that conversation, she stopped herself and she was like, "Oh my God, Cordelia, I'm so sorry that I keep chiming in and making it about me." And so I very politely said, I said, "You know what?" I said, "That's great awareness. Good for you noticing that." And I said, "I want to help you with that. And I also want just put some salt on your wounds. But here's what you need to do. Recognize that this is not a place for white tears. And there's an article that you can read to help you with that." And for a split second, she was like, "Wow, what did she just say?" And then she was like, "Oh, thank you for that." Right. And those are the kind of pauses that happen, but they have to happen because for so long the narrative has been right. When a white woman or a white man is like, "That's offensive to me," everybody runs and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. What can I do to make you feel better?" Right. And that's the problem. It's a two-way street. Guess what? If you're feeling uncomfortable, the person you're talking to or listening to is feeling uncomfortable too. And no one's tears weighs more than the other. We're both human.
That's an interesting way to think about it. I never really, this idea of tears. Because I think right now I can tell you, and I know, I have a lot of white friends, I'm sure you do too. And a lot of my friends, my white friends are really going through, there's a lot of confusion and hurt. Even clients or prospective clients that I'm getting on the phone with, they immediately are asking me, how am I doing? And they're like, I don't have a loss for words. I don't have anything to say, which is like, you don't have to say, you don't have to say anything. We're all living in this place. We're feeling things, but I can see the confusion, the helplessness, some of the guilt. There's just so like a mix of emotions coming from their side, but particularly if they have been allies, they feel like they have been allies and they don't know where they went wrong, because all of us have a role to play in this.
Yeah.
We all do. Because I was just reading, one of my friends just posted something the other day on Facebook, and I cannot, you probably know him, and I cannot remember his name, but I know the name of his books is How to Become an Anti-Racist. What's the name, the gentleman's name?
Oh, I just saw that this morning.
I cannot remember his name.
Thank you.
But I saw at least
that guy.
Hey, at least I'm going to be 50 next year, so I can at least say this. I'm losing it a little bit right here, but he in there we're talking about he talks about the idea with racism is that it's mostly about basically self-interest. And so when we look, kind of what you talked about, when we look back at history, all the different turning points and pivots, it was kind of always a reason to oppress that population, oppress that group. And it was because it was usually financial. There was a benefit. So it's kind of, as you talked about, we want to protect our property. So now we got to put these people under our thumb and do the things we need to do them so that our property is protected. And all these different turning points. It's a very interesting thing. And I started to read a book. My husband had referred to me, and I can't remember what that is, but I will post that out there when I repost this article or this video. And it's basically about kind of how the American empire and how it was built. And it is, a lot of it is about self-interest. It was about every pivot and that we look at when we see like the things that aren't great or are great. It was about self-interest. Oh, thank you so much, James. At least somebody was with it.
Oh, did he post the name of the book?
He did. It's Ibram Kendi.
Okay.
K. Kendi.
Yes.
Or X Kendi. Okay. Yeah. So, but thank you for doing that, because I was having a hard time getting it. But she was talking about that's focused on self-interest. And I do think that's true. And he does posit, though, that that hatred and then the opposite of like that being like love are not like the solution. And while I agree that like systems and policies and all of these different things have to be fixed, I mean, income levels and just housing and access to care and all these things have to be changed. So that is like something I'm not here to debate. I think that love, that listening, that empathy, that caring, that truly sitting with people and listening deeply to understand where they're coming from is absolutely necessary. That's the reason why we're on here, because I know you're shaking your head because I know you feel the same way.
I mean, that's what I say, because it's like, just think of the whole thing is about, you have to forgive yourself, right? And if you can forgive yourself, you can forgive somebody else. So that internal dialogue is that if I can't be kind to myself, I can't be kind to anybody else. Or, like, if you have a bad day, like, people are just looking for someone to aggress upon, really, right? So let's say you're not, like, you don't think of yourself as a racist, right? But let's say you're having a bad day and you can get away with something, right? And so you see someone and you're just like, the reason why I'm bringing this up, this happened recently. So I was in a store.
Okay. Good.
Right? I was in a store and I could see, like, from a distance, I just saw this woman, coming towards the same aisle I was going to. I didn't really think of it, but I'm always, because that's what I care about, people's emotions. I picked up that her energy was low and she looked like she was having a bad day. And I was instantly, I hope she has a better day, thinking that within myself. Lo and behold, we end up on the same aisle. And it was a little bit like she had her cart turned in a weird position and I was trying to get through with my, my two baby girls. And so then I was like, oh, which way are you going? Are you coming this way? Or, she's like, no, I have to go that way. And I was like, well, I have to go that way. I said, so, right? So, like, in a normal situation, it'd be, oh, I'm sorry, let me move my cart. No, she just stood there. And then she looked at me and I was like,
am I supposed to just be the only one who moves here?
Right. So I just smiled because my little girls were, like, inside, kind of, how they squeeze themselves between the case of the aisle, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the cart. And I was like, okay, I can get them to move, but at the same time, if she comes towards me, she's going to whack them into the display. So I was trying to get her to, move and tell the girls to come around on the other side. Anyway, so she's still standing there and she's like,
I'm not moving. It's up to you to move.
And I said, okay, are we going to do this? Or are you going to, you're going to move,
stand
right?
off in the grocery store?
And she's like, yeah, you're going to have to move. She was telling me I had to move. And I was like,
oh gosh.
I said, or you could just back out of the aisle because you're actually closer to the end of the aisle. And that way I can go this way and then you can come back in. And she was like, how dare I propose that she back away?
Oh, that drives me bonkers.
And it's not really that big of a deal.
No.
It's not. But you understand, she's having a bad day. She's probably looking for someone to pick on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I chose to do in that situation, I was like, you know what? Fine. So I just moved, because is it worth it? Is it worth it? And I thought about it later and I was like, my girls, to be honest, they're so young and they weren't even paying attention. But I was like, could I have handled that differently? Should I have taken a stand, right?
Mm.
Or should I have just been who I was and just recognized that she was having a bad day? And it's not that I'm Black and she's white. And,
It's interesting because sometimes it's like, are we turning things into race issues? Sometimes I wonder if we're turning things into race issues, or sometimes it's just like you said, they're having a bad day. Like, is it in fact because of race? And that's the thing we don't ever know. We can't get into their heads. There are times when I do a lot of walks with my husband on weekends, and we're walking down the sidewalk, and there's someone coming down with their dog, and my husband, he just clearly keeps his pattern. He just continues to step. And what I do, kind of like what you do. I kind of sense people's discomfort over. So I immediately like retreat to like right behind him and we walk singularly until we pass, partly because of COVID. So we're trying to keep separation and we know people may feel comfortable. See, right? Part of that. But part of it's like interesting because we'll be walking and people just walk out right past it, right towards us and expect us to move. And it's like, and I never even think about it this way. I know, but occasionally there's a little bit of discomfort because I'm wondering, am I the one who's supposed to move? These are the little things. I mean, the people who are watching right now and whoever's going to join, these are the little things that people of color face. I mean, I'm with my son the other day. I'm teaching him how to drive. He is the, anybody who knows me on Facebook, he's just a cutie pie, but he's about over 6 foot. And the African-American boy, that guy, man, I guess, young man at this point. And we're driving and I said, okay, listen, we're going to make sure that we put the license, when you start driving, your insurance and your registration are going to actually go in this flap right here. So you're not going to have to reach for your, you're not going to have to reach the glove compartment. You're going to go up here and here's what you're going to do. And I'm literally giving him, if a cop ever pulls you over, here's number one, you're not going to be wearing a hoodie. This is the conversation I'm having with him. You're not going to wear a hoodie. You're probably always going to be like in a collared shirt or something that makes, you look a certain way. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. You're not going to blast music. Like there's this whole laundry list of if people who don't like us don't have to go through, but it's natural. And I've kind of taken it for granted over the years that I've just done it. Just been a part of the makeup of you're a mother who's raising children who are at higher risk for just walking out the house.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's deep. Gosh, I didn't even think about that. I don't tell my kids to do that. I just have them keep it like in between, the dash, not in the glove compartment, but just like accessible. But I didn't even think about that. See, look, I'm not even teaching that.
Well, I mean, and people could say, well, why are you teaching them that? Well, I mean, it's like, and even more now, it's heightened for me. And maybe I didn't do it as frequently, but number one, he wasn't learning to drive till just recently after COVID had already gotten in, we couldn't even go to get his permit because everything was closed. And then they started to do it kind of more minimal and then we could finally go in. And then right at the heart of it was with the George Floyd killing, and then all of the highlights of all the other killings and all the other things that are happening. So now it heightens it for me and it makes me do it more. And while I'm not walking in fear and I'm not trying to create fear in him, I need him to be educated. And because right now we live in the suburb and things can kind of go over our heads. And many of the things that we talk about happen in different parts of the city. And we aren't there because we're in the suburb. So, but there will be times where he won't be in the suburb and he will be, right at the heart of it. And even if he's here, it's still going to happen. It's going to happen no matter where. And so it's just knowing that you are not, you are not insulated from anything that could potentially happen. So you just need to be aware, just be who you are, perfect person of integrity, do the right thing, but you're going to have to follow certain etiquette and procedures. And it's just weird to have that conversation. I never thought I was going to ever have to have that conversation, given my background with, white Jewish mother, Black Christian father. A lot of the leaders in my life were Jewish women. Let's just be clear on that. And then, of course, I had my other side of the family, and there were, of course, leaders there, African-American women who were there. So women were a big part of the leadership team in my life. And so I looked up to them. But that's the strange background, the story that has so many different levels and complexities to it, had me looking at things differently. My frame was just different. Let me put this little comment here that David put up. Our sphere of control. I asked myself, can I step to the side? If so, I'll be the first to make room for somebody. Ooh. Just that statement, I think by itself, can I step aside? Like just asking myself that question, any of us asking ourselves that question. I know we're talking about race, but when we think about our own, like who we are, our independence, what we represent, all those things, often we aren't willing to step aside. We aren't willing to let someone else speak. We gotta be the first. We're not listening intently. We just gotta be the first. And so, David, this thought was, this is this is one that will probably have me thinking for a while.
There's so many ways. I mean, I know specifically in this case, we were talking about like moving to the side when you're coming towards someone in an aisle. But, for me, if it's a man approaching and I'm a woman, from that perspective, whether he's white or Black, he better move to the side, and that's not an ego thing. That's because I'm a woman, However, I've had white men expect me to move to the side, and And I thought that was pretty odd. But the other way to look at his question is kind of like what you were saying. Again, ego, right? Considering another human being first, right? Can I put my ego aside? We're riffing off of your question.
We are. Or just your comment, which I think is just, it's
Yeah,
really actually kind of profound.
it
When
is.
we consider our current place, what I think is just desperately missing is our ability to empathize. And I mean in a deep way. I mean real empathy. And so I'm saying that from the police officer who had the knee on the neck, from any of these instances that have happened where the people were treated in less than human, they did not have their ability to see the person opposite them, number one, as human, and then to be able to empathize in their shoes and see how that interaction would leave them feeling, thinking, behaving going forward. They just weren't considering it. So if they said to themselves internally, can I step aside? I mean, what would that mean in this current framework we're in right now?
I mean, again, it's ego, and if you have absence of ego, right, then that leaves more room for compassion. It also gives you an opportunity to tune into your higher vibrations, and the highest vibrations we have: love, peace, and gratitude, right? Which goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, is like self-love is a thing here, because if you hate yourself, there's more room to hate other people. As and that's ego. That's the little child inside of us all. And so it's just taking a pause for the cause of yourself, and like have some compassion for a minute. It's like, whoa, what's happening here? Just self-reflection is so key. And I think if people start thinking from the perspective of, I want for this other human being what I want for myself, then, and we only make decisions from that perspective, we'll always be part of the solution, whether it's a man, woman, black, white, polka dot stripe person that we're dealing with, and that's really the larger issue. I'm not trying to, come off of race, but let's face it, Heather, we are just sacks of meat. Like, this is all an illusion,
Yeah, it's a very good point. We're kind of talking about humankind issues, and so like those like that writing that I did, that was right, and then the second article about seeking to understand was, like I said earlier, it was about my unique filter as a biracial woman who was brought up in a family who was racist against me. I have a filter there, but my filter does not lead me to hate, despite that fact. It leads me to love, to empathy, to connection, to care. It's a different place to stand. I choose to stand there. And I think the key with all those messages is that we can all have our own choices. The police officers, the law enforcement, they have a choice. I have a client of mine. I was with them a couple years ago. They're looking at trying to have me come back to help with helping. It's law enforcement, and they're wanting to help decipher some of these things that are going on. But what does it mean for them? And what I find, and what I found even then, is when I went into the situation, even they seemed a little bit distraught and a little bit hopeless, because they didn't know what to do to change the perception, because not all law enforcement are demons and evil and bad, and let's just be straight about that. I don't care who's listening right now, that's exactly true. But they were in their shoes having guilt, and they were frustrated, and they were angry, because they were like, what do we, like, we aren't these people that that are doing these things, but everyone's looking at, like, in the community, and it's in California, and they're looking at us this way. And so what I had to work with them on was to start to not think of themselves as like limited and stuck in that perception, but to be the one who changes the perception, and to be thinking differently about the power and the control that they have to embrace that community in a different way and to show up differently. It was a little bit different. It was a lot different for them, because I had them visualizing what it would look like, and working together. And it was a real big eye opener for me. It really was, to take a group of people that, they're walking around with guns most of the time. And I'm there going, stop it. Like, you stop. You don't have to accept this fate.
Right. Yeah. When talking about backgrounds for me, so it's interesting as I'm listening to you, what's the images that are coming up for me is I wasn't born Muslim. So I became Muslim like 2 months before September 11th. And I always say that, just it wasn't good enough to be a Black woman in America. I thought I would just make it more interesting to live here. And obviously I am not clairvoyant, but then after September 11th, I mean, it was heated. Everything was heated, it went from like, I would really tremble if I drove a little too fast on the road, and actually I got pulled over one time and the cop was like, why are you going so fast? Not, do you know how fast you were going? Not being polite with me. And I had, I homeschool, so I had 4 of my kids in the car at the time, and one was a baby. And so the baby started crying. So now, like, just imagine, now I'm trembling, I'm scared. I don't know how fast I was going. I know that I was just yelling at one of my kids because they didn't have on their seatbelt, and I'm praying that they have on their seatbelt. Like, all this is happening, right? And I'm just hoping that I wasn't reckless driving, and that, because then it's another situation, right? Because so he's like, well, I see that you've got kids in the car. Let me have your license and registration. And I'm like, okay. And I'm just praying and praying. And it just seems like it was taking forever for him to come back. He comes back and he's like, well, ma'am, you don't have a record, but I'm going to give you, I knew I didn't have a record. It's like,
telling me that.
It's not like I am, Speedy Gonzalez. It's, anyway, so he's like, you need to slow down. You got kids in the car and, it's not safe out here. And I was like, okay. So I got my like $1,000 ticket or whatever he gave me. And no, it wasn't $1,000, but it was a lot. It was like, oh my God. But I was just like so grateful. Yeah. But, and I always tell the story that time also, like going to the store with my kids and, people looking at me strange, and especially if my son, who is now 17, like knocked about, how boys are. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, wow. And so then here's where my life gets even more interesting. I try and have this conversation with my husband, and he's like, well, this is your country, because he's an immigrant. This is your country. You need to stand up for your rights. You're American. I fought to get to this country, and I don't know why you just let people walk all over you. And I'm just like, okay, so let me just give you a history lesson, which doesn't help because he's from Southeast Asia, right?
Yeah.
So they had the whole like Britain breaking up India thing, and he's from one of the 3 countries. And so, for me, this is what's actually helped me to put things in perspective. So I, just like you said, when you're teaching your son how to drive and he has to do this and he has to do that, I always think to myself, no, I'm not going to come from a place of preparing him as a Black man. I'm going to come from a place of, you're a human being. Let's do which makes logical sense. And you're an American. Stand up for your rights. Mm-hmm. And here are the laws if you do get stopped. If anyone tries, if they try to overstep their boundaries, legally, these are the things you can do. So, because my dad was a lawyer, right, and a judge at the end of his life. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm kind of, again, I'm grateful that my husband's an immigrant, because he kind of like got me out of that whole, looking at things from a racist perspective. A lot of times that's why it's really easy for me to just hone in on the vibration of people. It's like, okay, you're just a sad human being. How can I make you feel better? Let me smile at you and see if that works. And if they don't smile back, then I know they're extremely miserable and I just can't help them. And then I just make sure I steer clear, right? And it's to the point where I don't really pay attention to people's race. So that is being part of the solution, just looking at things logically, looking at things from a human perspective, and of course, always coming with a higher vibration. Even if you are, I mean, who wants to really go out when they're in a bad mood in the first place, and then you're in control of your emotions. This is another thing my mom taught me, right?
Mm,
So
yep.
my mom is my grandmother's Cherokee Indian. I got a lot of mixture going on. So my grandmother was a very powerful woman, very short woman, but a very quiet woman. And for her, she always taught us to look people in their eye and focus on the character of the person. Again, it's like I've always been taught, focused on the vibration, right? So from my mom's perspective, if someone makes you angry, you just became a puppet.
Mm, yes. That's emotional self-management at its best. And we're talking about emotional intelligence in all of these areas, because when we think about empathy, that is social intelligence when we look at emotional intelligence. And then when you were talking about this idea of loving yourself and being reflective, that's just self-awareness. So I think dealing with conflict is an element of emotional intelligence. So like being in the grocery store, walking down the street, and any of those type of situations where someone's trying to egg you on, this is what we're talking about here.
Yeah, you have a choice. And every single interaction, just slow it down, right? You just slow it down. It's like, what energy am I bringing to this situation?
Mm-hmm.
What am I looking for, right?
My husband's an immigrant too. He's from Panama, and we had the exact same conversations. He's like, "You were born here from Ohio. Like, how do you not know more of this stuff, that stuff, this, that?" Well, I think part of it is I'm taking it for granted because I've been a citizen my whole life, and like with some of the history, I should have gone after it myself early on. It wasn't all taught to me, and I didn't do that. And after I went to law school, I stopped being so. I read a lot before law school. Then I went to law school and I read so much that I think I was overread. And then I was like, please don't make me read one more thing. So it took me a long time to start to really read that kind of stuff where it was just like historical. And so I see this for me as an opportunity to grow in my knowledge. And I'm glad for whoever's out there now, joining, that we're here growing in our awareness and our knowledge. Seeing another person's perspective, understanding that our journeys are not all the same. They just aren't the same. I was talking to someone the other day. Anybody who's out there who's listening, if you are someone who can make a decision that means like a hiring decision, firing decision, any kind of decision that like impacts, let's say, an employee or somebody, just keep in mind there are differences. And when we're talking about hiring, having access to a process, to a system, to equity, to money, to home, whatever it is, having access makes all the difference. And so if you can make an impression, you can make an impact on what's happening right now if you just allow greater access. I mean, to me, I don't know, when I see things like that, it gets me excited because I feel like, oh my gosh, like I can personally control something, or I can personally influence something. I don't have to sit around blaming a system, a policy, because it's there and it's big. But if I individually, maybe I'm someone who actually controls policy, or I'm the one who creates systems, because it just depends on what it is you're talking about. Well, then great for you, because you actually have a bigger impact than most of us. But at any rate, all of us individually in our shoes can have impact by our choices. I think that's the
Exactly.
exciting part. I think instead of just going, "Oh, I'm going to sit on my hands because I'm not a policymaker. I'm going to sit on my hands because I can't discover or just deliver the pay model for our organization," or whatever it is, right? Yeah, but you can decide who comes in at what level, because if you're hiring at different levels and you're the hiring manager or whatever, you can decide that. So those are the ways that people are able to impact and be kind of the solution to the situation, the problem that is real. That is real in America. It's real. We can't ignore it. I'm not trying to fluff over it.
No, I mean, like you said, like at work, you can do it, slow down every interaction. You don't have to just push paper or, just go along with the flow. My husband was in a situation where he was considering hiring a woman. He's a software engineer, and most of his department was men, but he was like, she seems to really know her stuff, but she really shut it down sometimes during the interview. And he was like, so, but I really want to vouch for her. And I said, so compared to the other, male people that were, up for that job, he was like, nah, they're lazy. They all say that they can do stuff, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And I said, so what does the rest of the hiring team think? And he's like, well, they don't want to hire her. And so I put together an argument for him, categorically, vouching for her to get the job. And so he was one of 4 people on that hiring team, and she got the job. So it's like you can make an impact.
Mhm.
That's a gender bias in
Yeah.
that situation, but I mean, you can do it in any particular way. So, and I also I wanted to share this. I know this is off topic, but when I was talking about the cycles, 100-year cycle, fun fact: in July 16th, 1854. That was the first case of a Black woman being kicked off of public transportation because she didn't give up her seat to a white man. And this happened in New York City on a streetcar. And I happened upon her because her name is Elizabeth Jennings. And so that was the name of one of my relatives, or the last name Jennings. So I was doing research, surrounding that. And that is 100 years before Rosa Parks,
Mm.
and that is what they say really kicked off the civil rights movement.
Mhm.
But it already had happened 100 years before. And she had already, she'd gotten her rights and everything, the courts found in Elizabeth's favor. But it's just like, why did it have to happen again 100 years later? And so we don't want to be in 2120 and our great-great-grandchildren are, marching for Floyd's great-great-grandchildren.
Mm.
We got to slow down and realize that, that we cannot be on autopilot anymore. We've been gifted the opportunity of COVID, right? To be with ourselves and deal with ourselves. And in this self-awareness, finally, we actually paid attention this time when there was some police brutality and a Black man got killed, right? I can't even tell you how many white people I've talked to right now that they were like, this is the first time I actually cried about that.
Well, I mean,
It's like,
I think, like you said, they didn't have the space. They didn't have that kind of quiet space to consider and to reflect and like to be at home instead of like all the chaos of people coming in their office. So I think you have a very good point with that. Sitting in that space. And my husband does meditation. He's just like he's prayer and meditation every single morning. He's just amazing at that. And I do it hit or miss. I'm horrible at it. I mean, I'm a mover, shaker. I move, And so sometimes taking having the door closed, no kids coming in the office. And I do get to sit there and kind of reflect. And then during that time, I am able to take things in. And I think that's what it is, as them being able to have that space to actually think it through. Because this has happened so many times. George Floyd was not the first, and I really would pray that he would be the last. I would pray that, but I'm not naive, and so I mean there are things that have happened since George Floyd that just have not gotten news in such a big way, and so we need to know, be more aware, and you know what, speak up if something unjust is not happening. You know what, if you have to give up your job, you give up your job. It's for the betterment of all. So it's not just, it's not just about how I want you to treat me like I want to be treated. I want you to consider how it is that I in my own shoes want to be treated. And maybe you give a piece of yourself for me. So there's this level of sacrifice that I think that we need to do a little bit more of, because I think plenty of us, white or Black or Hispanic, we're all probably, again, we have a role to play. And so if we're sitting at a hiring manager table, we're at a place, we're at a crossroads with who we're going to hire, or pay, whatever. There's so many issues. I couldn't even list them. There are times where we are sitting at that place where we get to make a decision. And that decision might not be a popular one, but we have to make it. We have to make it. And it might mean we lose something, but I think we gain something too. Knowing we stood up for the greater cause. It's incumbent upon all of us. We can't put ourselves aside and say we're not the one.
But and here's the thing, that is abundance thinking too, Heather, right? Because, thinking that you're going to lose something is a scarcity mindset. But when we're in abundance thinking, it's like, you know what? there's something greater and better waiting for me. So I'm going to stand up for my values and whatever it is. And it's this, my values are more important to me than this thing. And, I just know it's going to bring so much more good my way. If we approach, that's what I was talking about, raising your vibration. When you approach life from that abundance perspective, you're not really giving anything up. This is for the greater good, your greater good, humanity's greater good. And, that I think that's the problem with kind of the system and the institutionalized racism, because it's trying to keep some for a few amount of people. And I think if we rewrote all the laws to be more abundance mindset, right? I think I wrote that in one of my articles, right? The self-reflection article. Yeah, that's what I was saying. So like, what if, oh no, it was in the previous article, because I was like, in personal development, we're always talking about abundance mindset, but what if in economic spaces we thought about, abundance mindset? Because the earth really has endless resources, right? We have endless everything, limitless everything, but we only believe it when it comes to our personal development, right? But everyone's not working on personal development, but we are all working on economic development. So there's nothing to lose. There's only something to gain if we're all, I'm going to do this for the greater good.
Yeah. And it might mean that, again, in the short term, there could be when we look at debits and credits, there could be some kind of like debit there to you in some way in life, right? But I do believe, I've done this several times. I get myself in trouble because I do speak up. I have a son that's like this. He's very justice focused. And so, but I believe, that two people can win. And even if it looks like someone was a loser, I still feel like there's a winner there. And so I think in this situation, when we have to be the one that speaks up or presents a counter view, helping with more psychological safety, or asking the person who's next to you of color that doesn't ever speak up, because who knows, if they want to talk, because they might be afraid to talk, may not be a safe environment. Maybe you can help create that safe space. Maybe you can say, well, one person we have not heard from is blank. I just love to hear your view. I'd like to hear that. And then all of a sudden they feel important and valued. And now you get their perspective, whatever that might be. But also, I think for whoever's out there, if you are not of color, just keeping in mind that the voices of all Hispanics, all Latinos, all whites, all black, like, we aren't all the same. Again, I talked earlier, if you've joined this earlier, we have our own filters. We have our own lenses. It's based upon our upbringing and the parenting and the education. I mean, it was like the community. It's the whole greater thing that happened with us. And then we rose up and walked with that. And then we changed our filter and our view and our lens, depending on other things that we did. So just keep in mind that when you're hearing our voices, they aren't all the same. And you're not going to go to the person tomorrow and it's going to be the same. So if you are in a position where you're trying to corral the voices of African Americans inside your workplace, or you're trying to get that perspective, you're not going to be able to corral it, okay? Because the voices are all different. So I think let's just open ourselves up to know that we need to listen differently, and let's just be the champions of compassion, love, empathy. Definitely, if you are someone in a position that has a lot of power to change laws and policies and systems, and I mean all of that, economists and things like that, right? We want them to use that power for the betterment of all.
Yeah, for the greater good.
Yep.
This was a really good conversation. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody too for joining. It's been great. I will have this link. I'll post it on my YouTube, and then I'll share it out. So anybody who wants to either share it or comment later, you can. But thank you for joining, and for Kim and David and Kathy, whoever else that was out there joining us and actually interacting with us. So have a great one. Have a great weekend, everyone.